Welcome back. Again, thank God for another beautiful day. So far, it's been a beautiful show, and Montgomery needs a new mayor. Yeah. And also, Montgomery needs to just get rid of. Now, by get rid of, I think the SPLC should just share or sell all their possessions and give it to the poor of Montgomery. Joining us now, we have Alan Mendenhall with the Heritage Foundation. Alan, how are you, sir?
I'm great. How are y'all today?
Very good. Better than I deserve. And what do you think of that idea? It would be downright Christian for them to just sell all their possessions and give it away to the poor of Montgomery.
Yeah, it would be in keeping with their mission, but not their practices.
Now, the other day I read your op-ed on air here, SPLC and the map that ate the territory. But for those who weren't listening or haven't read it, love to revisit this idea, especially when over the years, like you see, like, okay, the reenactment of the March of Selma to Montgomery, there is always, it could be that, or it could be something else. There's always that other element that is the supposed hate group. And it always, to me, didn't seem real. Like, I've lived in Montgomery and Alabama my whole life. I don't think I've met a KKK member, at least not one that was upfront about it. Like, it just seems like something from a bygone era, and yet they needed that demand. So in your experience, especially for folks who didn't hear the op-ed, like, how did you get introduced to this idea that maybe the SPLC was laundering their own, say, competition or hate themselves?
Yeah, so I guess the story you're referring to is in 2015, I was working at the Alabama Supreme Court as a staff attorney, and that was the 50th anniversary of the Selma to Montgomery March. And it was a big event. Barack Obama was there, George W. Bush was there, and all these marchers reenacted the march. And they came up through Dexter Avenue, and I walked down from the Judicial Building down to Dexter Avenue to watch. And it was a really, really moving experience until it wasn't, which is when I saw this guy. I'm trying to think how to describe him. He had a beard. He was in a uniform of some kind, and it had all kinds of iconography on it, badges and insignia. And I didn't know what it all meant, but it was clearly some kind of at least Klan adjacent outfit. And he was surrounded by photographers, I guess journalists, taking pictures of him. And I happened to be standing next to this black lady, and I forget what I said, to which she responded, "Oh, that guy is just getting paid by the Southern Poverty Law Center to sit there and make Alabama look bad." You know, and I was stunned at the time, but now I'm not so stunned. In fact, over the years, I was increasingly convinced that woman was right. Now, I don't know. I don't know who she was. I can't verify what she said. I have no idea if that was true or not, but it always did stick with me because it was just such a memorable and strange thing. And now when I see all these charges from the indictment, I'm like, oh, well, this makes a lot of sense. I'm actually not surprised to see these 11 criminal counts.
Yeah. And it's something people have suspected for years, and folks that were run out on a rail were suggesting, like, what I'm thinking of, the kind of, he's a bit of a shock jock, but I like him a lot. Gavin McInnes was taken on the SPLC for the longest time. And there's just a lot to this that a lot of folks suspected over the years. But you also, in the same essay, had another sort of run-in where you saw how things can go sideways all of a sudden. This is when you were much younger. Like, there are very real matters of justice and matters of dignity, but then there's also these moments where the theater takes over and where I've been saying this for a while, especially now with the redistricting that's happening from the Supreme Court decision, the Calais decision. And like, we have been doing the reenactment so much, it's like we seem to have lost the original, the original copy. But you have actually experienced something like this in your life as well.
Yeah, on multiple occasions, and sometimes dealing with the news. But the story I told in the op-ed for 1819 involved Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, which I went to college in Greenville, South Carolina, where Furman University is. I went to Furman University. And in those days, Greenville County did not recognize an MLK holiday. Yeah. And this was sort of an annual protest event around that holiday. And I went to a county council meeting with my college roommate. And in those days, as an undergraduate student, I was on the left back then. And so I was this young lefty going through the line and wanting to witness something historic, which I did. I met Jesse Jackson. He gave me one of these like hand clap things, and we gave each other a hug, a little embrace. It was kind of a cool moment. But as we waited in line, I don't remember how long we waited in line, but in my mind, it was a very long time. And we waited, and you had to go around the building, and there were these two older white gentlemen behind us, and they were in coats and ties. There was a tall one and a short one. And the older one, I mean, the taller one was very opinionated and basically was giving you youngsters, you're getting brainwashed by your professors kind of thing. What are you doing here? You need to think for yourself. And at any rate, we get up to the front door, and in a very complex situation, this woman materializes virtually out of nowhere, and she's pushing a younger black guy. And when I say younger black guy, younger than the older men that were behind us. He was clearly much older than we were as college students. But although he was confined to a wheelchair, he had big biceps, a big upper body, like he'd worked out or whatever. And she wheeled and cut in front of everybody who had been waiting in line for, I don't know, potentially hours. I really don't remember how long we waited in line. It was a long time. And it was frustrating, but my roommate and I said nothing. But the guy behind me, the taller one, said, "Excuse me, Buster," or words approximating those. I don't remember exactly what he said. I know he said Buster. I don't, I think it was "Excuse me, Buster." He said no bad words, no profanity, no epithets, nothing like that. And the guy in the wheelchair reached up and grabbed him by the tie, yanked him down to his lap, got him in a headlock, and didn't throw any punches. But by the time that had happened, law enforcement just descended upon the scene and whisked away the older white man. And all of a sudden, there was a black pastor that came there, and he put his arms around the guy in the wheelchair, and the news cameras were everywhere, and they were all taking pictures of the guy in the wheelchair. And this became an inverse of what in fact happened, which was the older white guy had been assaulted, and the black guy had done the assaulting, but had cut in line. And all of a sudden he was cast as this victim of racial violence, which was not at all what happened. But that's the story that played out in the media. And it was so surreal to see it happen before my eyes, where a situation that didn't happen was reported as the truth. And so I could kind of see how these stories get manufactured. And what's so troubling about all of this to me, and I say this in the op-ed from last week, is this is cheapening the experience of real racism. It's stealing from the genuine dead to fatten the accounts of the comfortably living. In the case of the Southern Poverty Law Center, if these allegations prove to be true, they're exploiting black people to make money. And I came up with a few analogies last week when I was doing some kind of media hits on this. I said, this would be like if you had like some kind of nonprofit fire department, and it was paying an arsonist to go out and set fires so it could go put the fires out, or a glazier that was hiring some kid to go out and break a bunch of windows so the glazier could go around and repair all the glass, or an antivirus software company paying someone to infect all these computers with viruses so the antivirus software company can make money. And then the last example that I came up with is it'd be like a security system hiring a bunch of burglars to go break into houses so they could have a business. And what's so odd about the Southern Poverty Law Center's model, as against all those, is that it's ideological. Their business model is predicated on the spread of hate. And if there is not, in fact, hate spreading, if hate is actually decreasing, if hate is on the wane, then their business is drying up. So they have to manufacture hate to give people the impression that hate is widespread and ubiquitous. Otherwise, their business model goes down the drain and they can't raise money.
Yeah, and then you would like for the state of Alabama, in particular, you called out the two friends of yours running for attorney general here in the great state of Alabama, to look into state charges for what the SPLC was up to.
Yeah, so we've got a federal indictment now, and that case is ongoing. And to me, it looks as though it could be the beginnings of a RICO investigation. Right now, only the organization itself has been charged, no individuals, but this could lead to a RICO. But yeah, why are the state attorney general candidates, the two leading ones, Jay Mitchell and Catherine Robertson, not talking about this? I think I laid out a few options, if I can remember them. There's theft by deception, charitable fraud, unlawful solicitation, falsifying business records, and criminal conspiracy. But there's no RICO. We don't have a state RICO, but those are all things that that the SPLC could be investigated on, potentially prosecuted on. And I think that the state attorney general has a duty to look into whether the Southern Poverty Law Center violated those laws.
Here, and I got to ask you as a quick aside, and I suspect this is going to happen to be more and more if I keep doing this job, doing this gig, and I get to know more people, to where you really do have two friends running against one another. And like right now, Robertson and Mitchell are just goring one another in terms of the ads and saying that's not true, it's defamatory and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I mean, just on a personal basis, like how do you just stomach this when you see folks that are normally lovely, brilliant people, and then you see the campaign start, especially, you know, we're a couple weeks out from a primary. Like, just how do you swallow watching this?
You know, this has happened to me a number of times. The two biggest examples are back when then Justice Tom Parker ran against Chief Justice Lynn Stewart. Lynn Stewart is my second cousin once removed, and Tom Parker I'd known my entire life. His mother-in-law brought my grandmother to Christ. They both were at my wedding, my first wedding, not my second wedding. And so I'd known them both my whole life, and that was awkward. But also, I had worked for Luther Strange and Roy Moore. I'm the only person who had worked for both men. And pretty recently, before that special election took place. And so that was awkward because I had that was a big national media race when it was Roy Moore and Luther Strange, and they were going neck and neck. And I had national media, New York Times, all these people trying to get me to say something negative about one or the other. And I would never do that. I would never say anything publicly negative about either one. But I got so sick of being contacted by the media. Who knows how they got my cell phone number, but I got so sick of it that I ended up writing an article for the Washington Times talking about what it was like to work for both men. And again, in the article, I thought it was fair. I didn't favor one or the other in the piece. I didn't criticize one or the other in the piece. I just talked about their personalities, what it was like to work for both people. So once that article was published, whenever somebody would reach out and say something about one of the two, I would just text that article. Everything I wanted to say is in here. You can read it for yourself.
Well, and it's a shame. And I guess I'm sensitive to these bad faith moments. And I mean that, I guess, in the existentialist sense of like where you're playing the certain game to win political office, and that complicated, interesting, nuanced person, you have to still play that game. So you end up like, well, sometimes the negative ads is just the way to go. And this is what the consultants are saying, and you're going that direction. And I've seen it on a few of these cycles now where what happened? Why are we? And I think it's just the nature of our politics. Sometimes it's sort of going for the lowest common denominator.
Yeah. You know, I'm not the type of person that would want to run for office. It's just not what I would want to do. I feel as if I can accomplish a lot more outside of that political sphere because I tend to talk to people in basically every office. Definitely every branch. I talk to people in every branch of government on probably a weekly basis, if not more often than that. And I could never do that if I had aspirations to run for politics or then I would become a threat to people and, all that. Yeah. And that's just not, just not how I operate. I don't have any interest in holding office. And it is unfortunate how politics gets a little ugly. And I mean, I guess I get it. I understand it, but it is unfortunate. We'd like for it not to be, but it's part of the system, I suppose.
And now hello, Jeff Deist. I got to mention Jeff Deist. I agree with him that you would make a great governor, but from what you said, I this is why I love you. I think you know the lay of the land and what some of these jobs imply, but having seen the King visit America, the King of England last week, can't we have like a ceremonial like governor king? And I think you would be really good at that job. Like just be able to remind folks of the principles that we're operating on.
Oh, well, I have something for you, Alan. I have something for you. When you were Furman Paladin and claimed to be left, remember what John Adams said, a boy of 15 who is not a Democrat is good for nothing. And he is no better who is a Democrat at 20.
Well, I'll tell you what the major issue was, is I was very, very into foreign policy at the time. Not that I'm not now, but I was very into foreign policy. And I, my very first day of college, freshman year, because Furman started late, was 9/11. So I walked out of Philosophy 101, the very first class I'd ever taken in college, or whatever it was. It may not have been called Philosophy 101, but that's essentially what it was. And I was walking back to my dorm, and I ran into a guy named Jonathan Horn. And he is a guy I played Little League Baseball with, who knows how many ages ago. I guess at that time it must have been 12, whatever years ago at the time. But it seemed like ages when you're 18. And he said, have you seen what's happened? And of course, he went through the whole thing. And I didn't really even understand what the World Trade Center was. I didn't understand when he said a plane crash. I was thinking it's this little small plane or whatever. Anyway, the invasion of Iraq happened, and I didn't support it. And I didn't like George W. Bush's foreign policy. And I thought that put me on the left. And I was an English major, an impressionable English major who was sort of under the spell of his professors. But I realized later on that, in fact, that sort of neoconservative foreign policy was more of a betrayal of the historic right than an alignment with it. And so I evolved, I changed my view. I realized, gosh, I actually am conservative. By the time I graduated in 2005, I moved to Japan, and I found Japanese culture to be incredibly attractive. The deference to elders, the reverence to elders, the reverence towards history, the culture, the politeness. It was incredible to me, just a sense of identity that they had and solidarity. And I started reading, of all things, Russell Kirk and Mises and Hayek and Rothbard. And so I got this free market economists that were going to my brain. I hadn't read economics before, and now I was studying economics, but I also had the conservative thing. And I remember having this revelation. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm a conservative. What am I going to do now? How could this be? Oh my goodness. Yeah, but I love Japanese culture. Just reminded me so much of sort of traditional Southern culture.
It's very orderly. It's very orderly, and it's extremely deferential. The brief time I was there, it's incredible culture.
Would love to visit one day. And before I let you go, we got to touch on this also. State Supreme Court severs relationship with Progressive American Bar Association and sets cap on bar exams. And I believe you were suggesting this just a few weeks ago.
Joey, I've had people say to me, why write op-eds? You don't really accomplish anything by writing op-eds, but that is not the case. And I think 1819 News has demonstrated that with a number of articles, but in particular, I think my op-eds on Regions Bank did a lot. And I feel as if this ABA op-ed did a lot. In fact, last Thursday afternoon, I was speaking at a fee event in Atlanta, but before the event started in the afternoon, I just got into the venue. And one of the Alabama Supreme Court justices, I won't say which one because he probably wouldn't want me to share, but calls my cell phone. I pick it up, and he starts telling me about the order that they had issued that afternoon, just basically saying we're not going to be dependent on ABA accreditation for our state bar admissions process anymore. And that to me was evidence enough that my op-eds had an effect, because why else would he have called me? He could have called anybody, why call me to tell me? And I'm very, very happy that the Alabama Supreme Court did the right thing here. They're following in the footsteps of Florida and Texas, which did this early in the year. I think we're going to see a chain reaction where many red states do it. And, our court was somewhat diplomatic about it. They didn't just trash the ABA the way kind of like Texas and Florida did. I took a lot of pleasure in that, but we were a little more diplomatic about it and reserved about it. And I respect that too.
Yeah. And there's something about it, not to get too about writing, but there's something remarkable about the op-ed essay form in particular that I still think is one of the most powerful ways. If you're trying to reach a few people or reach a single person, it is a great way to put your mind, your brain in their brain and really hit somebody between the eyes with an idea. And I don't think there's anything else like it. And I've been astounded at the power of that at times. And, in this world where it's tweets and it's long form podcasts and it's talking, there's something still very powerful about the written word to a point and purpose that can actually change things.
Yeah, totally. I think my piece next week may be different. I haven't started it yet, but last night when I went to take a shower before I went to bed, my tankless water heater was out. And so I've been showering in the freezing cold, and I don't know what my point's going to be yet, but it's frustrating enough that I think I might have to write about it.
Well, this time flew by, and I always appreciate your time,
Thanks.
Alan. If folks want to check out your work outside of just hearing you here on the show, how can they do so?
Sure. Just visit alanmendenhall.com or go to the Heritage Foundation's website and look me up there.
Thank you, sir. Talk again soon.
Thank you, guys. Thanks.
Again, Alan Mendenhall, folks, always appreciate